Welcome to the latest edition of the Canadian Division preview for the upcoming NHL season. I'm your host, Ryan Woods, and joining me today is Justin Alarie. How's it going, Justin?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm living the hockey dream. It's been such a long time since I've got to see my Sens play that I'm even excited to watch the Habs versus Leafs tomorrow. That tells you how much I'm looking forward to hockey.
Oh, yeah, same here.
Yeah. So I'll give you a bit of an introduction before we get into the preview. I used to play hockey against you in Kingston. We did some Kingston shinny. You're a goaltender, and I played
Yep.
goalie occasionally. You were much better than I am, but
Oh,
it
gee.
was always fun to play when you were there. Did you want to tell the listeners a bit about yourself and how you became a fan of the Habs?
Yeah, so I grew up in Montreal. I spent 28 years of my life there. Moved here to Kingston when I was 28, and basically I worked a little bit at the Bell Center for a couple of years. I did their concessions, they're getting the food prepped and did some waitering and so on and so forth. And that was absolutely an amazing gig. I usually show up to work about an hour before every shift and just kind of chill behind the players bench. And occasionally you'll have certain players come out and you'd say hi to them and sometimes have discussion with them. And I got to witness a few things. I got to work during the All-Star game in Montreal, the NHL draft where John Tavares was drafted and Victor Hedman was drafted. Uh, what else have I worked at? I was also at Carey Price's first shutout during his rookie season. Cool experiences there working in Montreal. I remember my very first shift working at the Bell Center. I saw Jean Beliveau walk by me, and of course, I was just in complete awe. So, Montreal is a very special place. I'd say I started cheering for the Habs probably when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I idolized Patrick Waugh, Kirk Muller, Vinny Domfus, like that core of that 92, 93 team. Uh, and my passion still is very strong today.
That's awesome. You sent me a few pictures before we went on of like the Carey Price, his first career shutout. So there's the picture you sent me of him in net, and I've also got the one of the scoreboard from afterwards. So it's cool to look at those.
There to the jersey you have hung up in the background there, the Andre Kostitsyn. Funny fact was that Andre Kostitsyn was the lone goal scorer in that game, and the Philly goalie was, I believe, it was Roman Czechmanic.
That's
So I
hilarious.
remember Carey Price was phenomenal.
He often does.
Yeah.
Anyway, so getting into this season, we'll talk a little bit about last year first. It was quite the
Yeah.
roller coaster ride for the Habs. Like they weren't expected to do much of anything in the season. Even the most optimistic Habs fan probably would have been happy with a wild card appearance, and then they had two separate 8-game losing streaks in the season, which was really tough. Ended up being sellers at the deadline, shipping out Kovalchuk and Scandella and Nate Thompson. So nobody would have expected like what happened
No.
in March, and of course with the return to play, they were the most lopsided underdogs in the first round against the Penguins. However, they got the upset. Did their performance against the Penguins in the playoffs and then against the Flyers, pushing them to 6 games, change your perspective at all of where the Habs are as an organization, if they should be considered a rebuilding team or perhaps a playoff team?
Well, that's kind of like a loaded answer right there, because many of us during the regular season wrote them off pretty much as, they're out of the playoffs and they're going to be in the sweepstakes for Lafreniere. But you got to keep in mind, too, with the lockdown that took place and canceling the rest of the regular season, it gave, the Habs a lot of time to rest up, including, their most valuable piece in Carey Price. And there's a reason why the league votes him, or not the league, but the PA votes him the best goalie year after year. And if I recall, the Pittsburgh Penguins were actually quite upset when they found out that they were playing the Habs because of the Carey Price effect. So, I mean, I think though, with all the much rest and the youth they had and some of the leadership they had in there, I think, especially with the emerging leadership of Jeff Petrie. He's a quiet leader on that team, but he single-handedly led that team in that first round against Pittsburgh, scoring some really big goals for them, blocking some shots. And it's hard to really say because um, anybody can be anybody on any given night, right? And I know Montreal, they have those big bodies. And I think, the fact that if you look at Ben Sherratt and Shea Weber, those guys were really tough to play against, in the corners in front of the net. And it just made Carey Price's job so much easier.
Considering where Montreal was this time last year, were you surprised at all to see how aggressive of an offseason Marc Bergevin had, bringing in Jake Allen as a backup goalie and all the other players that he brought in this offseason?
Well, to be quite honest with you, I mean, the backup goalie situation has always been a big question mark. I think, to be quite honest with you, our last decent backup, it was probably Peter Budaj and arguably El Montoya, but let's just forget about that 10-goal game that he gave up against Columbus a few years ago. But truthfully, our last decent backup was probably Peter Budaj. Our backup goaltending has probably been one of our most difficult positions to fill, right? And I do feel with getting Jake Allen, it has pretty much solidified our positioning a little more. Because if you look at previous years, we've missed the playoffs by a little bit, right? And if you factor in last season, the Habs had a total of 6 points in the standings that were accounted by backup goalies. You're not going to make the playoffs if you're getting all your points from your starting goalie, and that's a lot of weight on Carey Price. If from me looking forward, I think that if you start Jake Allen, a total of 20 games this year, you're going to get 20 solid, decent starts. You're going to get some W's in there, and it's also going to take a big load off of Carey Price too. Now, going back to what you said there about the Kovalchuk and so on, if I recall, the draft pick that we traded to the Blues was the draft pick we acquired from the Ilya Kovalchuk trade. So overall, that ended up working out. Now, did Bergevin was aggressive? Yes, absolutely. And I think this is what us Habs fans have been looking for a long time. Is as Bergevin said, he had a lot of boxes to check off, and he did just that. He got Toffoli, he got Anderson, he got Joel Edmondson. Who's a very tough to play against defenseman, which, from the look of things, that defensive core is that a lot of people are talking about as one of the toughest to play against in the league, or it looks like on paper it's going to be one of the toughest to play against, which is going to make keeping traffic in front of Carey Price a lot more clear, right? So I think if you look at the whole grand scheme of things, I think he did fill a lot of void. We did have to give up Max Domi, but I think the writing was on the wall for that, right? Because we were pretty much filled up in every position that we had, and I think Domi was the odd man out on that.
You mentioned the quality of the skill of the players that Bergevin brought in. Not only that, but they were also winners, like Jake Allen and Edmondson, both Stanley Cup champions with St. Louis in 2019, and Tyler Toffoli, Stanley Cup champion with Los Angeles. So if we take a peek at Montreal's lineup that we expect will be their opening lineup for tomorrow night, is there who stands out to you, and what do you like and dislike about this lineup?
Well, to be honest with you, like the whole bringing Corey Perry thing, actually, I was kind of shocked that they brought him in, and growing, seeing him play throughout the years, I've always had a dislike for Corey Perry just because of the type of player he is, much like Gallagher is probably to other fan bases across the league. But I was kind of hoping to see him penciled into the starting lineup, not starting lineup, but like the opening night roster. I do feel maybe Jake Evans might, would be the guy that I would replace with Corey Perry in there, and maybe move Byron over to center. Byron's a very quick guy. My big concern right now is probably their fourth line. Lekkonen's a good two-way player, but he does lack a little bit of the finishing qualities on that team. But the team, I do feel, is kind of built more like a playoff team, and I think that's a thing that a lot of people didn't realize. This season coming up is going to be very much like a playoff season going forward. With all these little 2-3 mini game series, or like playing a team 3 or 4 times over a span of like, a week, it's going to generate a lot of playoff like rivalries. But I'd say like I'm really excited. I'd say probably the most excited player I'm looking forward to seeing right now is Alexander Romanov. He has a lot of promise. He looks like he can play very well. I know a lot of the analysts there have been comparing him to Andrei Markov, who when Markov started his career, not many people really knew about him until he was at the show, and and a lot of people are comparing Romanov to Markov, and which I think if you add the physicality that he brings to his game, it could really benefit the Habs.
One of the more shocking offseason moves, which we talked a little bit earlier, of course, was the Domi for Anderson trade. I don't know if that was shocking as much because of Anderson and his circumstances last year, only playing in 27 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, or it was the extension that he was offered after that 7 years, $38.5 million. What were your thoughts on the trade, but also the extension for Anderson?
Well, I really like Domi, and I love the intensity and energy he brought to the Habs every night, and how he loved being a Montreal Canadian. I think that was very refreshing to see, and was always like really a big guy that was, or not big guy, but what I'm trying to say is he was always there to be a good ambassador for the Montreal Canadiens and bring free agents over. Now, there was a rumor that was being spread around that him and Josh Anderson were playing golf when they learned about the trade. And I don't know how true that was, because they were teammates and buddies in London. But I do like the trade. I do think that Anderson does address the size need that we need for guys driving to the net. He's a power forward. Of course, like the big question mark is to be seen here is like, is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be effective? I'm assuming they're going to use him probably up the middle in the power play, just because he brings that size to the net. And the whole contract situation, it could be one of those like high risk, high rewards, or it could be a very risky, it could be a really risky result for them, right? It could be like a Scott Gomez deal, which I know, people will say, hey, Scott Gomez wasn't signed by the Habs, he was signed by the Rangers, but you know what I mean? It's just one of those like very high contracts, but you don't know what you're going to get, right? Like I know Anderson had that one good season where he put up, I believe it was 27 goals and maybe 46 points. I could be completely wrong on that, but he could definitely perform in Montreal if he's healthy, I believe.
One player that Anderson reminds me of, in the similar sense that he's like a physical player, drives the net, and was always like that kind of guy that wore his heart on his sleeve, is Justin Abdelkader from the Red Wings. From when he started his career, you could count on him for 20 goals a year and to be a leader on the team. So I really enjoyed Anderson when he was healthy in Columbus, and I hope he can get back to that form. But even if he performs the way we expect him to as a 20-goal scorer, I'm not sure if he will ever be worth the contract that he signed right out of the gate. So for Montreal's sake, I hope that they're wrong, so that you guys don't have to put up with another Scott Gomez situation. But it could be an ugly trade. Yeah.
It could be. I mean, I guess we'll have to see. I mean, it's one of those ones, right, where it's like, we're going to see where the chemistry goes. And, I have faith that hopefully Marc Bergevin knew what he was doing. We'll have to see. Marc Bergevin clearly saw something that nobody else did. So I guess we'll have to see if this trade pans out for him. His track record, I think he was saying he's made something like 96 trades. He's won some, he's lost some. I guess we'll find out.
And before we move on to the next topic, we'll do a little bit of trivia for the listeners and viewers. How about you tell them what Max Domi's last tweet was as a member of the Montreal Canadiens?
So Max Domi's last tweet as a Montreal Canadian was to my daughter, actually, on her birthday, wishing her a happy birthday. So I sent out this massive tweet on Twitter that basically said, because my daughter, her favorite players are Carey Price, Thomas Tatar, Max Domi, and did I say Thomas Tatar?
Yeah, Tatar.
Anyway, and Galley. Anyway, so anyway, I sent out this massive tweet, and so anyway, the only player who actually replied to it was Max Domi, and she actually like tweeted it on his page and just wished her a happy birthday. She's wearing her Go Habs Go toque, and he complimented it, and then complimented her backpack even more because she had a really funny backpack with some weird designs on it or whatever. But the next day he was traded, and of course I had to break the news to my daughter as she got off the bus from school the next day. So of course she was sad about it, but she still likes Max.
One of the most exciting components for this season for Montreal is some of the influx of youth in the lineup. We already talked a little bit about Evans earlier, and you mentioned Romanov. But what are your expectations for not only those guys, but also Nick Suzuki and Jesperi Kotkaniemi going into this season?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. It really is, because if you look at the actual progression here, I mean, Kotkaniemi kind of took a step backwards in the regular season last year, and then he actually did really well in Laval, where he's averaging a point a game. And I know Joel Bouchard, the coach in Laval, he's really big on guys working hard, and just because they get sent down, it's not just one of those. They're not going to mess around, right? So they want to get back in that lineup. And I think Kotkaniemi, the fact that he came up and played well in the bubble, uh, he's got so much promise. He's got a really rocket of a shot, and I know he's put on some muscle, and he's bulked up. As for Suzuki, I think he's just a really good cerebral player. I mean, the thing I think I'm looking forward to is seeing him playing with Jonathan Drouin. I think if there's one player that needs to prove himself this year is Jonathan Drouin, and I think if he gets that chemistry with a cerebral player like Suzuki, to he can either feed the puck to, or bury some goals. Drouin can really benefit from having a line mate like that. But Suzuki is a benefit. I do think he's probably going to finish, top two in the team in scoring this year. I think he has a lot of promise.
Claude Julien, he's entering his fifth season in his current stint as Habs head coach. How much has he progressed as a head coach since his first stint in Montreal in the early to mid 2000s? And considering his age, and of course we saw last season with his health issues in the playoffs, we got to see a sneak preview with Kirk Muller as head coach in the series against the Flyers. How much longer do you think we can expect Claude Julien to be the Habs bench boss?
Oh, that's a good question, because I'm a big fan of Claude. I think Claude is he's a stand-up guy. I had a chance to meet him last year at the Blood Drive, and of course, I'm going a little bit off topic here, but maybe this is a good decision on his part. But I asked him if he had an emergency backup goalie, and he said you can never have too many of those. But um, I know, like, after he left the Habs the first time, he ended up going to New Jersey, and he did have success there. And if I recall, they were in first place going into the playoffs, and that's where they fired him. And then he ended up kind of finding his spot in Boston, and again, we know what success he had in Boston. He tends to have that really good defensive system in place, and he's a great coach, and I think right now we have the pieces in place to succeed. And I think this year and next year, if they don't set the expectation, we're gonna have high expectations here. So if they don't meet those expectations, they might be looking at a change, right? You never know. I guess it's all going to depend on how they play these mini series. I think, if they come out flat-footed, I think you could be looking at some potential changes. But he's a good coach, and I think he's one of the better ones out there, and I don't see anything happening this year. If obviously if everything goes down the drain this year, you might see something next year. I don't know. I don't like to say those types of things because I honestly don't know. This is just kind of just a thought process. But with all the pieces he has, I think this is the best team he's had since he acquired the team back in 2017, I believe it was.
Right. If we take a look at the standings from last season,
Yep.
Montreal, I don't know what you make out of these standings because they were from so long ago anymore, but it's really all we have to go off. And mostly what it illustrates is how close it is, besides perhaps Ottawa, of the quality of teams in the Canadian division. Where do you think the Habs can realistically finish this season?
You know, this is the thing, right? I was discussing this with my boss today. It is going to be a tooth and nail battle for every single spot. Um, I like to be optimistic. I know the Habs are built for playoff hockey. And even Brian Burke said it too. Like, he doesn't think there's any other Canadian team that's more built for playoff hockey than the Habs right now. But I don't know. I think I could see them finishing, like, the top three. I do think, as much as it pains me to say this, I think Toronto can easily win. Oh, sorry. Let me rephrase that. I think Toronto can win this division by a hair. And I don't see there being a clear-cut winner in this division because everybody is so close. I think this is going to be probably one of the biggest seasons we've ever seen in hockey in terms of competitiveness and rivalries being generated. But I think I could see the Habs finishing probably third in that division. And that's realistically what I'm kind of expecting. Permitting, like, you get solid goaltending from Jake Allen and Carey Price, and that their defense plays as well as people expect them to, and hopefully score more goals than they have in the past.
I agree. I really like Montreal's chances this year, and my expectations, even as a Sens fan for them, as much as it pains me to say, is that I have a feeling that they could potentially even win the division because of how close things are going to be. When I look at Toronto, I think they're obviously the favorite to win the division, but considering how many seasons that they've had where they've just constantly disappointed their fan base, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of them sliding from first and maybe finishing second or third. And if I had to pick a team to finish ahead of them, it would honestly be Montreal. So
yeah, especially at those 10 games that they're going to be meeting in the regular season, between Montreal playing Toronto, Ottawa, like these Eastern teams, it's gonna be tooth and nail. And again, like, even for the Sens, I think the Sens are going to be a really tough team to play against. They've acquired some really good pieces, and with a healthy Matt Murray, you never know. Like, that entire division is crazy. I mean, I can't. I've had time to look over a lot of these teams, and it's just hard to say who is going to be in that top four because it could go any way.
If you had to pick the three teams that you think won't make the playoffs, who are you picking?
Man, that's tricky. I might get some hate on this, but I'd have to say it depends on how. Now, this is of course, I am going to be going against probably the best player in the world here in Connor McDavid, but I think Edmonton here could probably. I think Edmonton could miss the playoffs, but if they do, it's not because they played poorly. It's going to be because they're close. And also, that's also because I think one of their weaker positions is in net because they got Koskinen, they got Mike Smith. Mike Smith, he's at that tail end now. He's always on his belly, it seems, when he gets scored on. Edmonton, oh man, yeah, that's tricky. Also, I think Winnipeg might be a team that you might look at as a bubble team where, because they got solid goaltending, solid scoring, but their defense is a little bit thinner. And I think Vancouver's going to make it. They've got two solid goalies in Holtby and Demko. And yeah, I'd say Ottawa will be my third team. No disrespect to your boys. I do think they're going to put up quite a fight this year. They do have a very big pool of youth, and I do think they're going to be great either next year or the year after. But I'd say that those are my three teams.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Edmonton would be in my three because especially they're missing Klefbom on defense, and he was played the most minutes for them last year, and their goaltending as well as their depth on offense. But behind McDavid, Nugent Hopkins, and Draisaitl, it's a little bit light, so I would pick them as well as Ottawa if Ottawa has a bunch of players take a step in the right direction, like that would be a huge success for them this season. Nobody expects them to make the playoffs. And then for my third team, I'm thinking maybe Calgary. They made a lot of moves this season and they added lots of players, but I just have a feeling about them considering how close it's going to be. And Gaudreau struggled at points last season, so if he continues to struggle this year and their top guys don't produce, I could see them being the odd team out also.
Also, depending on their goaltending too, with David Riddick, you don't know, right? Like it's all up in the air, and that's what it's going to come down to is tooth and nail. And if you get into a 2-3 game losing skid, you could be easily going down those standings very quickly. And again, like this is a season we've never seen before. It's like a baseball series format, right? So a few losses and you could be trying to claw your way back up, and it's not going to be easy.
And final question, who do you think is going to win the Stanley Cup this year?
I mean, obviously I would say Montreal, but no, I'm going to be realistic here. I think I have two teams here. I'm going to give you my reasoning here, and then I'm going to narrow it down to the one. So my first pick here is the Colorado Avalanche. Reasoning is, well, they're just a team that's just they have so much talent, but it's going to come down again to the position I love most, goaltending. Pavel Francouz, and you've also got what's his face,
Philip Grubauer.
Frontenac, Philip Grubauer. Yeah, come down to those guys, I think. And then like Nathan McKinnon, Rantanen, that entire team is good. Kel McCarr, it's so good. And then of course my second pick will be the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, that team since they've come into the league has been absolutely dominant. I mean, they took a risk trading Nick Suzuki to Montreal for Max Pacioretty, which I think right now, that's a pretty even trade right now, a good trade-off right now. They got one of the top wingers in the league with Pacioretty. They have Mark Stone. Those two seem to have very good chemistry. Overall, they also just picked up Pietrangelo. They have Robin Leonard and Fleury back there. Like that entire squad is just they're so stacked. They're fun to watch. That's who I think I'd pick for the Stanley Cup would be the Vegas Golden Knights, just because of how well rounded they are. Now also. I don't know if you saw the recent poll. I believe it was TSN asked a lot of all the NHL executives who they thought would be in the Stanley Cup final. I don't know if you saw this. 3 or 4 of them picked Montreal in the finals.
That's interesting. I wouldn't even be surprised to see it, to be honest.
I mean, I'm not setting that expectation on myself. I'll be happy to see him make the playoffs and then see what goes from there. Because they're saying that the first 2 rounds of the playoffs are going to be against your division, right? So that's going to be exciting to watch. As a hockey fan, you absolutely love seeing these Canadian matchups. It's what makes hockey great, and that's what I'm passionate about, is just seeing these matchups. Even if the Habs aren't playing, I'll tune into one of the other games, Battle of Alberta or Battle of Ontario. It's there's nothing better, right?
I couldn't agree more. Thanks again, Justin, for taking the time to come on the show, previewing the season for the Habs, and best of luck this year. Enjoy the opener against the Maple Leafs.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, eh?
Thanks again to Justin for coming on the show to preview the season for the Montreal Canadiens. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, feel free to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. If you haven't checked out the other previews for the Canadian teams, check out the playlist on my channel for all of those videos, and keep an eye out for my next video, as I will be reviewing the opening games for the Senators season this weekend against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Go Sens, go everybody!